In this video, I'm going to bring a crosscut Mado Nokogiri back into service. So if you don't know what that is, it's a big ass Japanese crosscut saw. This one. G'day, welcome to Chestnut Nag. My name's 𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗏. A while ago, I did a video on sharpening this saw, but it was a very sort of a cut down video because I didn't think this saw needed a lot of work. I didn't think it needed to be redressed before I just, sharpened the teeth and went for it. As it turned out, the cutting was a little bit rough because the teeth weren't all the same height. And because the points weren't all on the same line, it cut well, but it took a little bit more effort than it should have. A while after I did that, I came across this saw, and I'm thinking about making this my new user. One of the reasons being is that a lot of the wood that I come across is hardwood, and the teeth on this are a little bit shorter, which means that they're going to handle the harder woods a little bit better than the longer teeth on that one. It's a lot deeper, which means it's seen less use in its lifespan. It's got a very beautiful maker's mark and signature from the smith on the blade here. Very clear laminated forge welds showing that it is a truly handmade saw. Like, they're both truly handmade saws, but it's just a little bit more obvious within this one. And this one's just prettier. And as a man and a woodworker, I do care about these things. Pretty is nice. Pretty is pretty. First step though is we need to dress the saw points. So if I get my spirit level here, hoping you can see this, but if I bring my spirit level here as a straight edge, you can hopefully see that a bunch of the teeth aren't actually touching the spirit level. They're all different lengths. And so first step we've got to do is file the tops of the teeth down so that all the teeth are the same length. Well, actually, it doesn't matter that if the teeth are the same length or not. What matters is that the points of the teeth are all going to be on the same line. And that line doesn't have to be straight. It can actually be have a convex curve, it can have a concave curve, or it can be straight. But they all need to be on that same simple line. We're going to go for mostly straight though. So another project for another time. Now, I'm not as happy with this saw vise as I was when I first made it. It does the job, but I think I'm going to have to make another one. I've got a basic flat file here, and I'm just going to run that across the top. And what I want to see is a little flat bit on every single tooth. Once I've got a little flat bit on every single tooth, I know that I've got all the points in line. There's a clear flat point just there and here, but there's just a touch of one there, but there's not one here and there's not one there. So I've got to keep taking more off. This is one of the reasons why I want to redo this saw vise. It's really quick and efficient to move it around when you need to, but if you let it off at all, the saw falls out. That's not so good, especially with a big saw like this, because it hurts when it hits your leg. Okay, so it's someplace. Ah! What the hell? You can see here. Right, well, it turns out that something went really, really wrong with the sound on a whole stack of the clips from the sharpening of this saw. What I was trying to tell you guys is, in this bit of the video, is that I'd finished the dressing down of the points, but there was one tooth that was substantially shorter than all the others. So rather than filing the entire saw down to meet that single tooth, I decided to leave that leave that tooth a little low. And once I've used the saw for a number of years, I'll eventually bring that tooth back into service as the other teeth come down to meet it. Now, one of the things that makes sharpening Japanese saws a little easier is that you don't have to think so much about where to do the filing. The first thing is that you don't touch either side of the extra large gullets, or what the Japanese call the Mado, or windows. You know, there's no need to file here or here. If after many years of use the teeth had been filed right down so that this gullet is starting to disappear, then yes, you would deepen this gullet. But otherwise, other than that, you don't touch the gullets. When it comes to sharpening, this tooth, which is got the geometry of a rip tooth, if we look at it, just turn it up here, you can see that it's being filed, it's straight across. Unlike a rip tooth, it's not set, it's right in the middle of the curve, and its job is to clean out the sawdust from, you know, the cutting teeth, which are, you know, these ones here. But the only filing you do on this tooth is here. Right, now the exception to that is if you are restoring a saw that has gotten a bit rusty, in which case you need to remove all the corrosion. I recommend electrolysis. So let's say you've done that, and the back face of those teeth has got a little bit of pitting from, you know, the corrosion. In that case, then you do file out the back of the tooth to remove any pitting. Take it back to bare metal, just like you would with the flat of the chisel. And then, just like the flat of a chisel, once you've done that, don't touch it again, except with the lightest of lightest, you know, finest of fine stones to just push the burr back. Normally a Japanese sawtooth is leaning into the direction in which you cut, or towards the handle, because it cuts on the pull stroke. What that means is that if this face here, the left face of these teeth, forms the cutting edge, and normally that should be either vertical, maybe, or should even be leaning towards the handle more. In fact, given the rake of these gullets, these faces should probably be parallel with the face of the gullet. So normally what you do is you only file on the right hand side. Using left to right in this context is bad, but for a pull saw you want to file the side of the tooth that is away from the handle. And what that means is that because of the rake of the tooth, it means the point of the tooth maintains its position in the saw. But it's easier to see what would happen if you filed on this side. If you file on this side, you can see that the point of the tooth is going to move back towards the tip of the saw. And we really don't want that. Now, because this tooth is raked, well, it's not raked back, but it's not raked very far forward. It's not raked so far forward that it's parallel with the gullet. Because it's got a more centered rake, for want of a better term, as we file down this side, the point of the tooth is going to move a little bit that way. So it's been a couple of days since I had a crack at this saw. We had a lot of rain over the weekend, so I'm just getting it back to it. I thought that we'd have a close look at the teeth before I go on to using the double cut file or the finishing file. Because what I can see is that I haven't quite finished with the single cut file. Now under the macro lens you can see that that is not a point. There's definitely a little flat bit on top, so I've got to take more off with the single cut file. The one back behind it you can see is much more of a point. It's got a little bit of fibre there from the saw cover, but you can see that is coming to a much cleaner point. But obviously with all the burr on it, we've still got to clean that up. I'm showing that with you the macro lens, but also just looking at the saw as I can see it, I can see all these little points of light that are reflecting back at me. And I've got to keep sharpening until all those points go away. Now, if you look here, I've got the flat file there just to provide a bit of contrast. If you see here, if that face and that face were coming together in a perfect alignment, then there wouldn't be a flat spot just here to reflect that light at us. And you see that little pinpoint of light? That is light reflecting off a flat face back at us. And if the two faces were coming together perfectly, there wouldn't be a flat face there for that to reflect off. So anytime you're doing sharpening, anytime you get any light reflecting off the edge, it means that the edge isn't fully sharpened. Now, sometimes like here, it can be because we haven't taken enough off this face here to get rid of that flat point. Other times it could be because there's a burr there, but no matter what, whenever you can see light reflecting back at you, you've got an edge that isn't sharp. And this is a point I want to make in this video, is that saw sharpening is just like sharpening anything else. It's about getting flat faces to come together in a single edge or a single point. And in doing so, you make something sharp. And with saws, it's just the same. Now the reason we got so much burr is because I had to remove so much steel. If you remember at the start of the video where we dressed the points, some of the teeth were quite a lot longer than the others. In fact, we've got one tooth that was so much shorter that we didn't dress all the others down to that height, because there's one tooth that's still a few millimeters shorter than the others. But we dressed them all down, and the longer teeth had quite large flat points, and we had to file the tooth down until the flat point disappeared. And like with any sharpening, when you do a heavy sharpen, you create a burr. And so we're shifting now from the single cut file to the double cut file. And you can see there that the teeth are much finer. And just like when you go with a sharpening stone from a coarse grit to a fine grit as part of your sharpening process, that's what we're now doing. So what I want to do is carefully continue working the edges of the saw teeth, just like I would work the edges of a knife. And we're going to be as gently as possible removing that burr. So here is a tooth that I haven't worked on yet, and you can see the burrs there and the scratch pattern on that tooth there. And we go back here. This is a tooth where I've worked it with the double cut file. Now what you can see there is that the burr's mostly gone, but not quite. So I want to rub that up a little bit and then just gently bring it back. Do that a few more times. You can see there that that edge is a lot cleaner. Now it's still got a burr on it. The next stage, where is it? This is actually a Western razor hone. I picked it up at the Ballarat swap meet years ago now. Now you could use a Japanese finger stone or a piece of a broken stone. It doesn't have to be particularly fine, but this is a fine one that I had on hand. So we'll just get that in position. And what we're going to do is just gently pass the stone backwards and forwards against the teeth. And then touch up and repeat. If you know anything about Japanese crosscut saws, you'll know that this knife point cut that I currently have on this saw is not looking like a traditional Japanese crosscut saw tooth geometry. Thing is though, it is. So with a traditional, and if you're talking traditional, let's say more than 100 years tradition, the tradition was to keep the points to a knife edge. The idea behind that extra bevel, it's the same idea behind a secondary bevel on a plain blade or a chisel blade. It's to strengthen the edge. Now it means that the blade doesn't cut as easily, but it means that it will stay sharp for a lot longer. It's much more harder wearing. The other thing that tertiary bevel does to saw teeth, again, just like the secondary bevel on a plane or a chisel, is that it makes sharpening much easier. Now, this saw is now finished. It is sharp. I'm going to rub it down a little bit and so on, but it's basically the sharpening process is done. However, I'm going to use it, and I'll do a few jobs with it, and maybe after I've done that, it'll be starting to go blunt. Now what I could do is re-sharpen the knife point, so every single tooth is a knife point. But with just one or two strokes of the file, I can add that tertiary bevel, add that what would be a secondary bevel in a plane or a chisel, and the saw is immediately sharp again with very, very minimal effort. Plus, I get, in this case, a point on the saw teeth that is going to be more durable than the original knife point that I had on there. Now, again, sharpening is sharpening, and these are all concepts that, if you're familiar with sharpening chisels and plane blades and knives and so on, that you're going to know. The techniques of how we get to this point, though, are slightly different because we're using files and because the shape of what we're working on is different. But sharpening is sharpening, and the lessons that you already have learnt from sharpening your other tools, you can apply them to saw sharpening, remove the mystery, and while you might never be as good as a 𝗦𝗿𝗵 professional Japanese saw sharpener, you are certainly going to be good enough to improve the ability of your saws to cut. And with practice, I reckon you'll get it pretty good, because I'm already happy with my results, and my sharpening experience with hand saws is pretty limited. Yeah. But there is one extra thing that we need to do to fully sharpen a saw, as distinct from a chisel or plane blade, is we've got to get all these teeth working together, and part of that job is changing the set. And this is, I think, one of the things that can trip people up. If you've been around this YouTube channel for a while, it's probably going to come as no surprise that I'm going to tell you that it's not that difficult to set the teeth on a saw. But I think we're going to stop the video here and come back in another video where I'm going to go through two different methods of how to set the teeth on a Japanese saw. So if you want to catch that, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell notification, otherwise you might miss it. And I'll catch you guys in the comments. Bye-bye. Oh, and one more thing. I'm in the process of organising a bulk order of a whole stack of sets of chisels from a smith in Japan. There's going to be some great deals, discounts, because I'm going to be ordering in bulk. And if you'd like to be part of that, well, stay tuned, because the announcement of the details and how you can participate and get some very good quality chisels at a discounted price will be released soon. But stay tuned for that. Catch you later. Bye-bye.